A lot of the human jobs that are being done today to physically look at these records, we can train computers to examine, to do them more efficiently, effectively, and reduce the cost of home ownership and allow for greater transactional freedom. And that's what we're doing in the tax world, and that's what we're doing in the settlement service and title world, and that's what we're doing in the valuation world. I say it, we don't build our technology for a tomorrow, we build it for 10,000 tomorrows. And if you look at what Voxtur is doing with its validated data, putting it into a data mesh and delivering data as a service, in other words, answering questions before they're asked, Voxtur is actually optimizing each component piece throughout that ecosystem, that real estate financial ecosystem.
Jim Albertelli is back, CEO of Voxtur Analytics, trades on the TSX Venture under the symbol VXTR and trades in the United States under the symbol VXTRF. Jim, welcome back.
Hey, good to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, Jim, today I wanted to talk to you a bit about an article I read in Forbes magazine. There was a gentleman who was on the Forbes Business Council, and he wrote an article called The Future of Real Estate Transactions on the Blockchain. The gentleman's name is Adam Rodolfi, and it was a very thought-provoking article because as I read it, I thought about Voxtur Analytics, which is essentially digitizing the entire real estate ecosystem in a software as a service model. And I thought, that kind of sounds like the blockchainification, if you will, of real estate. So I thought, I'm going to call Jim Albertelli and hear what he has to say about that. And you did not disappoint. You came up with some interesting counter ideas to the article. And so the article begins with this story about the city of Miami proposing to allow its residents to pay their property taxes in Bitcoin after a penthouse sold to an anonymous buyer for $28 million, all paid for in Bitcoin. So how realistic is it to expect that there will be a wholesale migration of real estate transactions to a blockchain?
A private transaction between two parties to buy a multi-million-dollar piece of real estate with Bitcoin or Ethereum or some other digital currency, that makes sense between the two of them. Both of them have their coin purse. Both of them have, in other words, a repository to put it, and they decide that's their modicum of transfer, and then they can turn it into fiat currency, meaning into US dollars at any time, and they're willing to take the risk. It makes a lot of sense. More globally, if you think about just given the volatility in some of the digital currencies, and I'll tie this all back into the real estate, there's a lot of volatility in it. So if you paid for your, let's say you paid an employee in Bitcoin or some digital currency with the volatility, they may literally be paid, and then seconds later or a day later, all of a sudden they've lost 20 or 30% of the value. Then what are they going to do for their grocery bill? The groceries haven't changed by 30%, and now I've got 30% less. So I'm not going to eat for 30% of the days. I don't know if that'll work out well. So I think until some of that volatility leaves the marketplace, then you could really see it being paid for things that would translate quickly into everyday consumer goods, right? And it makes sense. And I think that and some of those digital currencies are even, they're being more regulated. So, some of the efficiency gain may not be there. I think there's other things, and I won't go down the rabbit hole totally of digital currency, but I do believe generally in the concept of distributed ledger technology and currencies like Bitcoin having a place in the global economy and helping facilitate transactions more efficiently and effectively for people. And so I think there's a very good benefit for that. Now we'll switch gears and we'll go to blockchain. And in particular, blockchain has several interesting places to play in the real estate transactions place. One of the places that I really like blockchain is in that smart contracts concept, where let's say you have a purchase and sale situation, and both of you go in, and in the purchase and sale, right, are certain milestones. Application for my loan, let's say if you have a loan financing contingency, or an inspection. With the smart contract, it can activate and it can validate the timing and the occurrence and the results of those certain milestones. So it really becomes a living, breathing repository for validated data. And so in that example, I can see where a distributed ledger, with validated counterparties, inspectors or lenders can come in, and those dates can be validated, okay, efficiently and effectively, and prevent fraud or prevent delay, and give transactional clarity to a transaction, and do it more efficiently and effectively, reducing the cost in the transaction with greater certainty.
And where does Voxtur fit into all that?
Voxtur plays in the validated data space. So Voxtur actually could provide the information that supports the real estate transaction and validates that data, whether it is stored in an end-to-end encrypted database per se, or if it's stored on a distributed ledger technology. Voxtur is that validated source of the truth data that would enter into the transaction. And that's the underpinning, whether it's all of the settlement services and title world, and I'll talk particularly in a second about blockchain for title, and we can talk about that. But the validated data around the support of a transaction, the validated data around creating the tax assessment, validating it for the consumer and knowing that's correct, the validated data around the actual value of your underlying real estate asset. Voxtur has a tremendous data store that has been validated to third-party sources, to public records, etc. So that is data you can rely on. When you take a digital asset and a database or you put in, let's say, a property address, and you want to validate the value all along, every day, every second, every minute, you want to validate the tax status, the transactability, the interoperability of that asset, or the ability to borrow against it or loan against that asset. Voxtur provides all of those validated data elements that allow you to do it.
So how does that reconcile with what Voxtur is doing?
Voxtur has done a lot of things. In the meantime, and several other companies are probably attacking the same problem as well. What we've done is we've used other technologies, for example, artificial intelligence, which is the ability to train over large data sets, machines to learn unstructured data and to create efficiency. So, for example, while it used to be the case that someone would have to go to the deed and record room and actually examine documents and then give you a commitment that this title is good, we've been able to automate a large percentage of the review and the committing to the insurability of that title using machine learning and artificial intelligence subdomains to do that. So there are a lot of human pieces still where we can extract efficiencies and evolve the model. And Voxtur is using its validated data store to train the computer to do certain things like that create additional efficiencies. Right. So will we 5, 10, 15, 20 years get to a singular portal where you transact real estate? And could we get there? We certainly could get there. Would that give you a source of the truth? It would. Would it change certain laws and regulations that are in effect today? Yes. And that just takes legislative session, focus, time, and effort. And it needs to be a problem worth that investment in the infrastructure to be able to effectuate that change over time. But what does that mean for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years? It does mean that a lot of the human jobs that are being done today to physically look at these records, we can train computers to examine, to do them more efficiently, effectively, and reduce the cost of home ownership and allow for greater transactional freedom. And that's what we're doing in the tax world, and that's what we're doing in the settlement service and title world, and that's what we're doing in the valuation world. I say it, we don't build our technology for a tomorrow, we build it for 10,000 tomorrows. And if you look at what Voxtur is doing with its validated data, putting it into a data mesh and delivering data as a service, in other words, answering questions before they're asked, Voxtur is actually optimizing each component piece throughout that ecosystem, that real estate financial ecosystem. So that's how we're using software as a service or data as a service to do that.
So then I guess it is the existence of legal inconsistencies across interstate commerce that preclude the ability of a standardized crypto unit, be it a blockchain unit, a smart contract like Ethereum, from being actually interoperable as a standardized real estate transactional platform. So And it sounds to me like what you're saying is Voxtur is using that lack of consistency as its opportunity to provide clarity, to provide the service, to provide the software as a service that essentially is your business. So that makes me wonder then like if we look at it, say, and compare it to Google. Google conducts 92% of the searches, delivers 92% of the content that people are looking for, dominates and distributes 92% of human attention. Is it conceivable that, is it a winner-take-all kind of landscape and future that we're heading towards in the real estate space, where it's like, well, everybody's going to gravitate towards Voxtur because they've got the most diverse data set that is the most validated and reliable, with the most sort of AI and machine learning tools bolted on in the appropriate places, so that this is the best one-stop? Or is it more of a case where it's going to be a distributed, decentralized ecosystem with different data repositories and different licensing agreements and different accesses that ensure a more competitive environment?
Well, first of all, I love the way you summarize it. One, you scare the hell out of us when you talk about Google. Maybe we should all be scared, right? Maybe they're the ones that ultimately should do it, subject to certain, again, regulations that might prevent that complete monopoly. But to your point, you made a comment about it in the interstate commerce. While the mortgages oftentimes and the financial instruments are regulated by the federal government solely, the bastion of states' rights in federalism is around property rights are so like endemic to a state's rights. So they're oftentimes given wide latitude. And so the individual laws concerning property ownership and property transfer are so intimate to local municipalities and states that's protected under our federalism. So that is, to a point, there will be, there could be a uniform effort among states, like the Uniform Commercial Code in the sale of goods, where, states mirror one another to get that same uniformity. But it won't be a federal cram down because there are states' rights that impact us. So that was a great pickup on your part. So that brings you to the next, question that you posited, which is, okay, so there are different states' rights. Is there a winner take all in this field? Ultimately, determining the winner-take-all status of it, and can you have a vast majority of the data? Yes, you can. Will it be ubiquitous and 100%? I don't think so. No. There are micro segments where there's deep data that several people may license and use that data. So there should be competing suppliers of certain technology and certain data in certain submarkets. There will be several aggregators in the ecosystem. So I think there'll be several large players generally, and those large players will end up, basically contracting with smaller players on the micro level. So overall, Voxtur will have plenty of opportunity to continue to grow and grow exponentially from where we are today over the next several years as we continue to normalize vast amounts of data and provide those services. If you follow the money, then you'll say that big financial players, when they determine that the accessibility of these microservices and some of what Voxtur does is widely spread enough, they will then dictate certain standards of how they would like the information. For example, like right now, if you're a large financial institution, a tier 1 bank, and you could now you could require an e-closing solution. Okay, it's e-closing solutions. There's enough out there now. You could go that direction. They haven't. Still, a small percentage of total loans are done completely with an electronic closing solution, with a remote notary. So we have remote notarization. Makes sense. With baby boomers, not so much, but with maybe, our kids or grandkids who are completely within that virtual world, and maybe the meta world, if you're reading those articles about the expansion of the metaverse, maybe the meta world, their closing may be completely electronic with a completely electronic avatar. who's already validated their IP address and probably done a retina scan and says they are who they say they are, and they do have this much dough in the bank, and their asset's worth X, and they'll get out their virtual loan in a virtual store in a virtual environment. That tangible asset will be real. There'll be a real payment that comes out of their real bank account, whether it's in Bitcoin or it's in fiat currency. But you can start to envision a future state where the money, Wall Street, and several large players, a BlackRock and a Blackstone and a Wells Fargo and a JP Morgan, determine, hey, wait a second, there would be great efficiencies if I created a virtual store in the metaverse. I'm going to have better validation over the documentation that's executed. In other words, the digital documentation. And because it's going to have dual factor authentication in a real validated environment with real up-to-date data. And that's the future. That's going to ultimately that's going to demand and control the bingo, how the bingo gets played. And we're seeing the move in that direction already. We're seeing where a cryptocurrency like a Bitcoin has nodes, and those nodes solve complex equations that give it validation both to the internal system and ultimately to what they solve to create the Bitcoin. So it's a validated data node. With the financial enterprise, ultimately, certain data elements will be validated. Could be Voxtur data, for example, around title, or it could be Voxtur's validated data around valuation, where the financial institution just says, hey, if you're going to originate a loan, that's my node. That's my value node. That's my title node. That's my tax node. That's my income verification node. That's my deposit node. Those are all the components of creation alone. You can start to see a future state where there are nodal players accepted, and that'll create efficiencies in the lending market and the real estate transaction market, lowering the cost of home ownership. That could be a future state. That's what Voxtur is building towards as we normalize data, build our data, our data store. So think about it like this. Do we use blockchain? We do in several ways. We use it for our data ingestion engine and title. We use it to provide the end-to-end encryption. We use a distributed ledger. Do we do it in other places? We do. Again, it's around data security and integrity, and so we do take advantage of a blockchain environment. Is it cloud native? It's cloud native, of course. And so we use cloud native blockchains where it makes sense, and where we can play in the future state of origination, servicing, or the capital markets, and be part of that change. So today, we use artificial intelligence, we use data, we validate the data, and we plug it into today's infrastructure, but we're thinking about 10,000 tomorrows and what could be the future. Wow. I know it's a lot to unpack. But you don't ask easy questions. Ask an easy question, I'll give you an easy answer.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you answered my question. I did ask the question. So that's great. Jim, we're out of time. We're going to leave it there for now. We'll come back to you soon. Thanks so much for your time today. Look forward to talking to you again soon.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.